and welcome to Music Business Artistry, where we talk to people who are in the music today and can tell us what it's actually like. I'd like to introduce you to Elise MacGregor Ferrell.
Hello.
And Aaron Clegg, who are part of a band called Charmas. Tell us about your band, please.
Charmas plays Celtic music and sea music, and we're aiming toward world music with a Celtic influence. We've played rock in bars. We kind of do everything, but when we record, we have done a lot of traditional style, original Celtic music so far.
So tell us, Aaron, you may be a good one for this, to tell us about what sea music is.
Oh, yeah. Well, sea music is songs that sailors used to do to coordinate the timing of work on the ship. And, you know, there's a long history behind it and stuff. I'm kind of going through my brain like, what should I say about this? First time I was exposed to it was when I was probably about 13. My dad took me to a session and I heard people singing sea shanties. And I was just so blown away by that, and also they were playing Celtic music too. I just felt like, wow, there's real music here. I took a friend of mine to a sea music session a number of years ago, and he was amazed. He's a good musician. He said, wow, this is really musical. I mean, it's really interesting music. And so anyway, a lot of it's a cappella singing and different rhythms for different jobs aboard the ship.
Yeah, I think that would be very interesting to come hear that.
Says our shanty singer. But also sea music includes surf music, which we have done some. We're from Santa Cruz, so we do surf music.
Good point.
And we've done a little Celtic water music where you overlay and make rhythms that are like water. So like on our sea music album, there's also a sailing drinking song. All aspects of sea music, we kind of put them together.
Good. I love music and I love water, so it's fun to hear it all together. So tell me a little bit about the Celtic music and what it is that you do with it.
Well, we started off, the very beginnings of the band was a bunch of session players who played tons of tunes together, just jam together and play tunes that we know. And then on 2013 St. Pat's, we said, hey, let's go out and play a gig. And that's kind of when the band started, and we went to a regular bar and played those kind of Irish tunes, and then we realized we'd better branch out a little, and we got more players, and it evolved from traditional. Oh, and then we got Aaron, and he was really into the singing. So then we shifted more, and he brought the sea shanties. So then we incorporated that. And
as I recall, you didn't even know I sang until after I got it.
That's right. I recruited him from a session as a flute player. It was oh, you sing really good.
You recruited me, and then I showed up and I said, by the way, I sing too. And you were like, oh, okay.
and our name, Charmas, had a different meaning in the beginning. And it's a long story, it's on our website, but we've kind of redefined it to mean players come along when we need something. Sometimes we lose people, sometimes we gain. We had a female vocalist for a while, and around the time that she was leaving the band and Aaron was coming in, and then we discovered he sang, so now he was our lead vocalist, you know.
And I understand that you have a different size of group depending upon the venue and who you're playing for, right? So for the private parties, you have a smaller group.
Yeah, we'll be down to 2 people sometimes, or we can bring the full band, yeah. Or for a wedding ceremony, you just do 2 or 3, and then for dancing, you do the whole band.
So it's music from Ireland and from Scotland?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
So this might be a good time to introduce at least the biggest instrument that we have on the table to start with.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us about this one and perhaps show us how you hold it?
Well, these are the great Highland bagpipes. As everybody likes to remind me when they see me with them, every culture has bagpipes, not just the Scots. But I think our bagpipes must sound nearly the best, if not the best. I love the way they sound. And they're so loud, I'm told you can hear them up to 2 miles away.
Right. Which is why you're not going to be playing any of them in the studio in case anyone was worried. But,
yes, I'm not going to play them
right now. Yeah.
But you just blow in. It doesn't matter when you blow because you're squeezing with your arm, and that's kind of how you play them. It's got 3 drones. They just do their thing, and then you play the tune down here.
Okay, and you play the tune down there as though it's a flute? A clarinet?
It is different from a flute, which I played as a kid. You have very straight fingers, and there's a lot of cross fingering, and it takes a whole lot of coordination, eye-hand coordination. So you practice, diligently all the time.
So how long have you been playing the bagpipes?
Only 6 years.
6 years.
6 years, but I play all the time, and I have a really meticulous teacher in Canada who makes sure that I get everything right.
Good.
So, yeah.
You can accomplish a lot in a few years if you put your heart into it and a lot of time.
You have to play every day a lot.
It's also a strength instrument, like many instruments are. I mean, you have to be able to blow, you have to be able to maintain the posture and all.
Somebody told me there was a lady who was learning to play bagpipes, and she would stand in front of her bed. So if she passed out, she would just fall backward on her bed.
And I believe it. I tried bagpipes once, and I was really not able to make much of a sound on them.
Yeah.
I wasn't strong enough.
I started learning them because all my life since I was born, I go to Canada every summer where it's very, very Scottish, and I march every weekend in a parade, big 100-year-old pipe band. And so I finally learned them, and then I realized how much time it was going to take, and I said, "Oh my God, I'd better have this be my job." So,
good idea.
Yeah. So that's that one, and then Erin has some Irish instruments, which are more peaceful, like the Irish.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I guess I'll talk about the penny whistle. It's not named because it used to cost a penny. It was named because people used to, kids used to busk with these things in the 1800s. They put out a basket or a hat, and people would put a penny in. The original penny whistles, when they were invented, it was a rolled up sheet of tin, and there was a wood block for the mouthpiece. And they used to cost about 6 pennies when they were first invented. And
not so little anymore, though. Right?
Yeah.
So are those easily available right now?
Oh, sure, yeah. Penny whistles are pretty widely available. This is not so available, a wooden flute. A little bit of research goes into buying one of these things. This is made by somebody who lives in Vermont, handmade. And
same wood as bagpipes, I think, right?
This is grenadilla, African blackwood, and it's got silver inside the head joint, but the rest of it is just the wood, and it has silver rings here.
What wood is on the bagpipe?
Blackwood.
Okay. Yeah. And so is that a typical flute? Is it played like a typical, like a concert, like a symphonic flute?
Yeah, it's played similarly, and it's actually in the same pitch as a concert flute, but it's actually a, how do I explain this? Previous to the invention of the standard metal concert flute, this is what was standard in an orchestra. This is actually a little bit more modern version of that more ancient ancestor of our. It's starting to sound like we're in biology here, but it's an ancient ancestor of the concert flute. Yeah. So it's played in this position, just like
which he also plays.
Yeah.
The silver flute.
Okay. I mean, they're not much different. It's a little bit more finger stretch with that, and it takes maybe a little more strength and breath to play that than a metal flute.
And that's used in Irish music. Is it also used in Scottish music?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, a few hundred years ago, that was used in classical music, but it was very hard to get, the intonation on that is not as precise as with a metal flute. And so orchestras are much better off with
a modern metal flute.
And even in a genre like jazz, you're much better off with that because you can play in all 12 keys. This is diatonic, meaning you're stuck into you've got a choice of a few different keys you can play in, but it's it offers a different sound, and so that's why I like it.
And you have one more instrument
yes,
there, right?
I'm going to talk about my low whistle, which is basically just the same thing as as the penny whistle, except it's an octave lower, and it has it has a lower tone because of that. So, yeah, it's pretty much it's a low whistle.
Beautiful, moody.
Yeah.
We decide when we're putting together art pieces, do you want it really moody and kind of abstract? That's the low whistle. You want a little more precision? That's the flute. You want it exciting? That's the penny whistle, you know?
Yeah, perky and frisky would be like the sound of the penny whistle there.
So what are all the instruments that if everyone who has ever been in your band played at in the same gig, which I know they don't. I know that you pick and choose depending upon the gig and who's available and all.
Yeah.
What are all the instruments that would be in?
So we would have, starting with you, those three, saxophone and silver flute, fiddle, bagpipes, tenor banjo, guitar, bouzouki, mandolin, keys, and organ. And drum kit drums, bass, Scottish snare drums, and hand African drums, and bowron, Irish.
And of course the vocals.
And bass,
I like how you do the hand when you said the bowron too.
And acoustic bass. One time Mick rented an acoustic bass for a gig, so stand-up bass, you know. That might about cover it.
Good. I think, for people who think that Celtic music is only bagpipes, it's interesting to hear what you can pull together. I know that you also use it for your world music, but a lot of that is used in the Celtic music.
Well, that's and I actually have some Spotify playlists, and some are Celtic, and one is world music. And when I'm deciding what list, that's kind of where I draw the line, like, oh, there's some African drumming in there. But if it's just the guitar jazzing up, that's kind of still Celtic. So, yeah, it's kind of fun being in this business to define that. How are we going to call world music and Celtic music, and what's traditional?
I know, it's funny, the term world music doesn't seem to overlap with Celtic, even though that's part of the world.
Well, the Celtic women got a Grammy in world music, so I figured.
I stand corrected.
That actually, I was like,
cool.
Really? Then okay, just straight Celtic.
But I agree with you. But I do know what you mean. That quite often, that in the past, when you would go in a music store, you would have Celtic music, and then you would have world music. But I think that was kind of when the idea of world music was new, and it really meant. Middle Eastern, African, or Indian, or sometimes Asian.
Maybe South American.
Yeah. That's right. The Indian flutes and such.
The kind we're trying to go toward now is experimental world music. That's a new term. So, I guess that means
listen to some of
you
that.
Can do anything, and you're like, hey, it was experimental.
Yes.
Yeah.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Sounds fun. So, how did you get started in this? So we'll start with you, Elise. How did you get started doing music?
Well, I started doing music as a kid.
Okay.
And I did piano forever and flute. And then I learned in the very traditional way with the traditional teachers, which gave me no interest in keeping with it. So I didn't play music for a long time in the middle of my life. And then a friend offered to teach me fiddling for free when I started having kids, before I had kids, just before, and I was like, okay. And then I just got into it in a new way that I had never experienced in my childhood. And then I realized I loved it, and I kind of wish I had done it sooner, but I had all this in my gray matter. So like, even though I learned the bagpipes late, it's my fourth instrument, it's not so hard, and the programming is in there,
So what does fiddling mean to you? Because it means different people depending upon what type of music they play.
I say the difference is you're a rhythm instrument when you're a fiddler, and you're only like a singer when you're a classical violinist. But also the classical players I've heard, they're good at playing, cooperating with the group sometimes. But I think the very best classical players who solo sound very much like the very best fiddlers who make it ornate in that beautiful way.
That's been my experience too. And I didn't realize that. I've said this on another show. I was blown away one day when I heard one of the great fiddle players. And I had never realized how they have, some of the great fiddle players have the same skills as a great classical violinist. And I honestly didn't know that before. I had thought of it as a big step down. And, you know, I was kind of embarrassed to realize how ignorant I was on it. But it's been fun learning more and more and finding more and more great players. So.
And I've taught some lessons to kids, you know, and they brought me their school classical music, and I said, let's ham this up a little. Let's make it more fiddle music. And they're looking at me like, are we allowed to do this? You know, yes. But they get into it. It's good for the kids who aren't having fun and practicing.
Especially if it's someone who's going to quit, because they wouldn't, then maybe it can keep their interest. I do know that some classical teachers don't want the kids playing other types of music until they've fully developed the habits of the classical, you know, the hand position and all, because habits are hard to break once you've gotten into them. So I think it's useful to know what type of music you're going to focus in, and then go for it.
Yeah.
So how about you? How did you get started in music?
How did I get started in music? Well, my parents were into music when I was little, and it seems like I have a memory of my mom taking me into a toy store when I was about 5, and I just went right to the aisle where they had all these plastic music instruments, and I just kind of ended up there, and they could never get me out of there. So I'd end up with some little, you know, recorder or some other little cheesy thing that you could blow into. But you know, it was a way of me expressing that. You know, I think there was something in me that always knew music was important, even if I couldn't say that the way I can now. And yeah, how did I get into Celtic music? I used to follow my dad around to gigs. He played shows when I was a kid, and you know, I heard him play a lot of Celtic fiddle and things like that.
He has a very rich voice, his dad. He'd be an inspiring, he's a good character guitar and singer. Yeah.
So when I was about 16, I decided to get a penny whistle, and I had one of these tunes that I'd heard my father play kind of rattling around in my head. So I went out and sat in front of the house on this big boulder in New Hampshire where we used to live. And I figured out how to play this tune. It took me about an hour to figure it out. And I came back in and said, Dad, I think I figured out how to play this tune that you like to play called the Rose de Lisdon Varna. And I played it, and the next time he had a gig, he had me come up on stage and play that. Of course, I was terrified, so I kind of froze up and didn't really, I made a bunch of mistakes and I froze up. But that was the start of me kind of playing Celtic music in front of an audience, and then after that I wasn't so nervous the next time. And
so do you go to jam, you know, when you go to festivals and all, you go to the jam sessions? Sometimes they have those beforehand for...
I went to Strawberry since the first Strawberry at Camp Mather.
Okay.
And all the way up until the burn. And then I started going to the Pleasanton Highland Games on Labor Day weekend. But yeah, the Strawberry Bluegrass jams.
I have not been there. We missed it by a weekend one time, and it was fun because there were still a lot of musicians around, and so you could hear music in every, you know, as you're walking around. But we weren't there for the actual festival. It worked. Yeah. But I've been to several of them, and I really enjoy it. And especially getting there early and just listening to people.
I had an inn to be right in front of the stage in the backstage area, and so from being young, I could see the musicians so close. Mm-hmm. And it's such a different experience anytime you can go to a small show, because you could see what they're thinking. And
yes. Yeah, and I like the ones where they welcome the kids, you know, especially the very beginners. And of course, some of the kids are amazing musicians, so I'm not trying to diminish the kids, but I mean when you've got the little bitty ones, you know, you've got the little bitty kid with the quarter-size violin or so, first learning to play the fiddle tunes. I think that's great.
Yeah, and I went to sessions a lot. You know, I went to a session almost every week for 7 years when I was living in New Hampshire as a young adult. Not really so much at a festival, but just as a weekly session at a pub.
And you learn a lot of the music by ear, right, for this? Right.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's show up to the session, and you know, my first started, I had my penny whistle, and and I knew about 3 tunes, and then I would just sit there and eat and have a beer, and every time they play one of those tunes, I'd have to quickly get ready and, and do it. But then as I kept going back, those tunes were just, again, rattling around in my head, and you know, after a while I knew 20 tunes, and then I knew 50, and then I knew who knows many, 100. So,
and then all the variants from different people, like I've heard it's not Celtic, but the old time tune, Margaret's Waltz, I've heard many different ways. And I love it every time. I love it every time. It is always interesting to hear what new twist someone's going to put in it.
It's like hearing somebody tell an old story around a campfire. It's that sort of thing.
Yeah. But I think now going into our next phase music, I've been doing this all this time, and I have a lot of music in my head that's been building up, that's new.
That you've got to put on the next CD.
Yeah.
So you've done a few CDs as for your band, right?
Well, we've done a pure C music CD, and then we did a pure Celtic CD, which kind of encompassed our last 5 years. And now we want to do a CD of new music that's, well, pop folk songs and experimental instrumental music that's completely different and just original. So
since this show is also about the business of music, I want to ask, how your first CD, how did you fund that? How did you get it started? Just so.
Our first CD, we bargained with our friends and made it in bedrooms and, you know, every way we could with a laptop. We did a little one, and then we expanded. We went on Kickstarter and funded expanding it to a full CD and juiced up some of the stuff, re-edited what we had done. And then the second one, we just went on Kickstarter right away and funded it that way, and knew, but the project still grew bigger than we were planning. It ended up involving 20 musicians.
Second one.
Past members of the band, current, everything, And
then did you do that in a studio? Because you said
we did it in a real studio, so everything worked all the time, and you know, that was a really wonderful experience.
Well, it sounds like the normal progression, you know, that the first one you do in bedrooms, living rooms, and whatnot, and then move on up. So this next one, you have another one coming up that you're going to work on and get funded. If people want to hear your different types of music, you have a website, right? What is the name of your website?
charmasband.com. So like charmasband.com.
Yes, and you never did tell us the name of that, how it got started, and what it means now.
Oh, well, originally it was a Gaelic term that our first drummer, Russ, found on the internet, which meant like family and love and together. It kind of was all these warm, fuzzy, and charmed. And then we talked about it, and we weren't sure, but we started using the name, and we went back to look for it and actually have it. And it was gone. Nobody could find it. Russ couldn't find it. Nobody. And so finally, we just defined it ourselves. I'm probably responsible for that, but like the band, I never have a plan, really. Probably the new CD is the first time I'm having a plan and trying to implement the plan, but usually stuff just happens. And we go roll with it and go, we should do this next. Look who we met.
That's the thing. When you say you don't have a plan, the reality is you're interacting with musicians all the time. So your plan evolves, I think.
So whoever comes in shapes it, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's what Charmas means. It's kind of like serendipity. It's our Gaelic word for, you know, the stuff will come when it's the right time. The people will come.
Sounds good. So in the future, you're doing the CD, and are you going to continue to perform live?
We're doing more private performances right now, and I think it's a tough business in Celtic right now. When we got into it, all you had to say to a venue was, "Hi, we play Celtic," and they were like, "Oh yeah, Celtic's hot, come." Now when you call and you say, "Hi, we play Celtic," they're like, "Oh, Celtic's dying," for the venues.
Yeah.
It's still out there, but it's the change in the technology of how people listen really threw the older listeners for a loop. Nobody quite knows what to do. And so, we need to make money, and we want to evolve. So right now we're doing just private gigs mostly. And also, Aaron has a little shanty sing going, which is really cool. You know, we're staying in touch, and we're gearing up for the next phase music behind the scenes, and then we want to record it and just come out and do festivals with it, kind of the other way around from what we've done before. Record it first. And
well, I want to hear more Celtic music. So, you know, when you say the venues are not asking for it as much, the individuals still are. There are a lot of people who love Celtic music, and I hope to hear that. And the sea shanties, you know, it's something that my dad was in the Navy, and we've heard so many songs over the years. So I've got to come hear you and hear some of these. And
it's not just to hear, it's to sing along.
Yeah,
that's right.
You can come lead them yourself, lead your dad's shanties.
Yeah.
No, I've got to learn them first. Yeah.
Well, and the great thing about sea shanties is if you just walk in the door, and you know, I've had people email me and say, well, can you send us lyric sheets? And I say, well, you won't need them. Just come on in and listen.
Because some of them are
they're so
repetitive enough
catchy,
that
right. The choruses and refrains are really easy to sing along with, and they're designed to be that way because you know, the whole idea is that people are pulling on a rope or something, you know, or pushing on a capstan, and they need to just be able to sing right away without, you know, when they just walk on board the ship. So.
And so do you sing these on ships?
Well, rarely. I mean, I'm not much of a sailor myself. I'm more of a singer. But yeah, there's a sea shanty session in San Francisco that's on board a ship, and I've done it. I've done different shanty sessions and other types of things on ships. There was a schooner up in Gloucester, Massachusetts, that used to do. Oh, actually, it's a funny story. My company went on an outing one day, and I played music out there with my friend, and then the owner of the thing decided maybe we should have a session on the ship and invite the musicians to come for free. So I did that a few times, and I think they kept it going. I think they're still doing it now, and that was probably 15 years ago. It was 10 years ago, I guess. Yeah.
That sounds fun.
I have to say, I couldn't sing at all until Aaron, finally I got singing with him on the harmonies, you know, and I have him to thank that now. You wouldn't want me to sing solo, but I can harmony, because you just really learn to belt it out. You really have to sing, and I had to sing side by side to him, and he's loud and clear.
Yes.
And so what a great way to learn to sing. You know?
Yeah, I think it takes confidence. It takes singing with someone who knows what they're doing, and you automatically start mimicking whether you realize you're going to or not.
When it builds your confidence, because you're not, it's not gentle, it's like bagpiping. You're just like, and then, you know.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show today and telling us all about your music. I really enjoyed having you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.
Great.
Thanks. All right.